I've told you already! This isn't right!
The HOA president shrieked, "Arrest him!" Meanwhile, I was waist-deep in freezing water at 6 in the morning, pushing my boat into my own lake. That's when Margaret Thornfield came charging down my dock like she was queen of the shoreline. Her manicured finger nearly grazed my nose as she screeched, "Trespasser!" Behind her, a bewildered deputy fumbled nervously with his handcuffs. "Ma'am, this is my land," I said, water dripping off my waders. "Not anymore," she spat back, flecks of saliva flying. "You're being arrested for illegal boat launching." The cuffs clicked shut around my wrists while my little 12-foot aluminum boat rocked gently beside us, guilty of nothing but floating. Around 15 neighbors had gathered on their decks, phones raised, documenting the absurdity. The mingled scents of coffee, lake water, and Margaret's choking perfume filled the morning air. And here's the twist. 10 minutes later. I legally owned her beloved Marina, so let me ask you, how would you react if they slapped cuffs on you, standing on your own dock? Drop your location and your worst HOA nightmare below. But before we get there, let me rewind and explain how this all began. My name is Jake Morrison. 3 years ago, cancer took my wife, Sarah. We had bought this lakeside property 15 years back, our dream retirement escape. 12 acres of pristine land, full ownership of the lake, and a piece you couldn't put a price on. Every morning, Sarah and I sat on that dock with steaming mugs, watching mist curl across the water. The haunting calls of loons, the soft splash of waves on sun-warmed boards, the mingled scent of pine and her lavender shampoo drifting in the dawn air, this place was our sanctuary. Especially in her final brutal months after she passed, fishing at sunrise became my lifeline. Every day at 5 a.m., Rex, my German shepherd, and I pushed out in that little aluminum boat. It wasn't just a boat, it was the thin line that kept me from drowning in grief. Then came Margaret Maggie Thornfield, walking, talking proof that some people exist purely to make life miserable. 6 months ago, she seized control of the HOA like Napoleon claiming Europe. Picture a razor-edged 55-year-old piloting a pristine white BMW SUV as if it were an armored tank, always dressed like she was staging a corporate coup, even at a neighborhood barbecue. The kind of person who'd fine you for exhaling too loudly. Before this, she'd been a city council member, until voters had enough of her unbearable attitude. Within a week of becoming HOA president, violation notices tripled. Christmas lights still up on January 2nd. $200. A dog barking in broad daylight? $150. A garden gnome turned the wrong direction. Don't even ask, I kept my head down. Property spotless. Dues paid early. Figured she'd wear herself out, bullying easier prey. Big mistake, her declaration of war arrived by certified mail on a stormy Tuesday. Official HOA letterhead, her extravagant looping signature, and a $500 fine for unauthorized watercraft storage, causing visual pollution inconsistent with community aesthetic standards. I read the notice 3 times at my kitchen table, Rex snoring at my feet, coffee growing cold. According to Maggie, my boat launch, unchanged since the day I bought the property, now violated some made-up community uniformity requirement. My dock, it claimed, was suddenly HOA property. Attached was a nauseating letter on pink stationery reeking of bargain perfume. Individual boat launches create unsightly infrastructure, undermining our community's premium market positioning. Mr. Morrison's facility represents a significant aesthetic liability requiring immediate remediation, premium market positioning. Over a 12-foot fishing boat that's older than some of my neighbors' kids. I'd been using that same launch for 15 years. Everyone knew my routine. Half the neighborhood had borrowed my ramp when theirs was down. Mrs. Victoria next door still waved from her kitchen window every morning. But now somehow I was public enemy number 1. What really boiled my blood was the hypocrisy. Maggie's own mansion, a monstrous glass palace she built after bulldozing. The original cottage had an imported sand beach and a concrete seawall that violated every natural shoreline, rule she pretended to enforce. But my modest wooden dock? That was suddenly the great community crisis. That evening, I called her, foolishly hoping for reason. "Mrs. Thornfield, this is Jake Morrison. From Lakeshore Drive, there must be some mistake about my dock." "No mistake," she cut in, voice cold enough to freeze fire. The board unanimously decided that individual watercraft facilities damage property values. You have 30 days to remove it, or penalties escalate. Ma'am, I own the water rights. It's written in my deed. The HOA supersedes individual claims whenever community welfare is at stake. Do not contact me again. Click. I sat staring at the deadline, Rex tilting his head with the same baffled look I wore. This woman had just declared war on the one thing keeping me sane. She had no idea what she'd unleashed. 3 days later, her campaign escalated. A notice taped directly to my front door, not mailed, hand-delivered like some medieval challenge. Emergency HOA meeting, Thursday 7 p.m. Community Center. Mandatory for all waterfront owners. The paper still reeked of her sickly perfume. That Thursday, I walked in expecting maybe a dozen people. Instead, 40-plus neighbors packed into rows of hard-folding chairs. Fluorescent lights buzzed like angry hornets overhead, mixing with the bitter smell of burnt coffee and disinfectant. You could feel the tension. Maggie sat at a folding table like it was a judge's bench, dressed in a charcoal business suit that probably cost more than my boat. To her right sat her secret weapon, Curtis Thornfield, her lawyer nephew. Pale, fidgety, mid-30s, tugging at his tie like it was strangling him. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, voice bouncing off the concrete walls, "we are here to address a severe threat to our community's property values and legal standing." I blinked, wondering if she was announcing an oil spill. She swung her arm toward me like I was a criminal. "Mr. Morrison has constructed unauthorized maritime infrastructure encroaching on HOA property. His dock extends illegally into common waters, exposing every homeowner here to liability." Then came the gut punch. Curtis rolled out a survey map, one I'd never seen before. Not the survey I had on file. According to their version, my dock stretched 15 feet into HOA-controlled water. Murmurs rippled. Neighbors shifted forward, metal chair legs scraping on linoleum. Some looked sympathetic, others skeptical. Time for my counterattack. I rose slowly, pulling from my jacket pocket the original deed and 2009 survey. Sarah, God bless her, had insisted everything important stay locked in a fireproof safe. Her foresight had saved me again. "With respect," I said, spreading my papers on their table. "This tells a different story. My survey clearly showed water rights extending 200 feet from my shoreline, far beyond my modest 30-foot dock. The deed explicitly granted perpetual water rights, mineral rights, and access privileges. I'd learned long ago to keep originals handy, watching too many neighbors get fleeced by HOAs claiming land they didn't own." Curtis leaned in to examine the documents. His face went sheet white. He whispered to Maggie, whose jaw clenched so tight I thought her teeth might shatter. "Surveys can become outdated," she snapped finally, though the iron edge in her tone had dulled. "Boundaries shift as communities develop. The HOA has a duty to defend common property against individual encroachment. That's when Mrs. Victoria, my 78-year-old neighbor, rose from the back row with an unexpected air of dignity. "Excuse me," she said, "but Jake's been using that dock since before this HOA ever existed. My husband and I watched him build it in 2009. We borrowed his boat launch when our grandson visited." A handful of other long-term residents nodded in agreement. From across the lake, Tom Hendris called out, "Hell, Jake let us use his ramp when the county boat launch was closed for repairs last summer." Maggie's immaculate composure shattered like thin ice in spring. Red patches bloomed on her neck above her pearls and spread upward toward her carefully applied makeup. "Personal favors don't create legal precedent," she snapped, her voice shooting up an octave. "Mr. Morrison's ongoing violation creates insurance exposure for the whole community. If someone is hurt using his unauthorized facility, we all could be held liable." Curtis cleared his throat, uneasy, and adjusted his glasses. The HOA's insurance explicitly excludes coverage for privately owned recreational structures that haven't been properly permitted and inspected. Now she was whipping out the fear card. Brilliant. Threaten everyone's finances over my harmless fishing dock that hadn't harmed a soul in 15 years. "I've been using that dock safely for 15 years, I said, keeping my hand steady, though my anger climbed. "Not one incident. Not one complaint until 6 months ago." Maggie shot back that previous boards had been negligent in their oversight. "This board takes its fiduciary duties seriously," she declared. The room felt like an overheated pressure cooker on the verge of blowing. Someone's stomach growled in the silence. Metal chairs squeaked as people shifted uneasily. "Here's what's going to happen," Maggie announced, rising to assert control. Mr. Morrison has 30 days to remove his dock and stop the unauthorized water access, or will pursue legal action for property encroachment and community endangerment. Legal costs will be charged to his property account. The meeting adjourned amid awkward quiet and the rasp of 40 chairs sliding across linoleum. Neighbors filed out, avoiding each other's eyes, not wanting to be caught in the blast zone. War had been formally declared. Time to marshal my defense. Maggie doubled down on her power trip faster than I'd expected. The Monday after our showdown at the community center, I woke to find a uniformed security guard standing at the edge of my property line, clipboard in hand, staring at my dock as if it might detonate. Fresh diesel hung in the morning air. His pickup idled in my driveway. Rex started in with that deep warning bark that means stranger danger. "A morning?" I called, shuffling down toward the water in a bathrobe and slippers. "You lost?" The guard turned and I nearly choked on my coffee. Derek Kowalski, Maggie's unemployed son-in-law who'd been living in her basement for a year, looked soft and out of place in a crisp security uniform still showing package creases. "Sir, I'm conducting lakefront patrol for the HOA," Derek announced, trying to sound official while avoiding my gaze. "Your dock has been posted as a violation area requiring daily monitoring." Daily monitoring? I peered past him and saw fresh, no trespassing signs hammered into the shoreline around my dock. Bright yellow plastic screaming construction zone against the wood and rock. Derek, isn't it? Maggie's son-in-law? I kept my tone friendly, though I wanted to toss him in the lake. "When did you become a security guard?" His face flushed above the collar. "I'm certified," he mumbled, tapping his clipboard. "Mrs. Thornfield hired me to ensure HOA property compliance. The absurdity hit like a slap. Maggie had literally employed family to harass me on my own land. She wasn't merely petty. She was creating paid positions for relatives out of HOA funds. Over the next week, Derek appeared every morning at precisely 6 a.m., parking where he blocked my usual path to the water. He'd sit in his truck for an hour writing God knows what on his clipboard while I tried to maintain my usual routine. But I'm not one to sit and gripe. While Derek performed security theater, I spent afternoons at the county recorder's office combing through every HOA document I could find. The musty smell of old paper and the clatter of ancient copiers became my soundtrack. That's where I struck gold. Dolores Martinez, the county clerk who'd been filing HOA paperwork for 30 years, pulled me aside on Wednesday afternoon. "Honey, you might want to look at this," she whispered, sliding a manila folder across the scratched wooden counter. Inside was Maggie's election paperwork from 6 months earlier. County rules required HOA elections to be properly noticed to all homeowners at least 30 days in advance, with notices sent certified mail and return receipts. Maggie's election notice had gone by regular mail to only half the community. No return receipts. No certified delivery. The vote that put her in power wasn't even legally valid. "I've seen every trick in the book," Dolores said, adjusting her reading glasses. "This lady cut corners everywhere. Half these documents aren't even properly notarized." I photocopied everything, hands trembling as the machine hummed. This was bigger than my dock. It threatened the entire foundation of Maggie's authority. Meanwhile, Derek's harassment ramped up. He began following me around my own property with that damn clipboard, documenting my dock maintenance like I was some environmental felon. One Thursday morning, I caught him measuring the distance between my dock posts and the shoreline. "Find anything interesting?" I asked, sneaking up behind him. He jumped as if I'd fired a starter pistol. Just documenting compliance issues," he stammered, nearly dropping his tape measure into the water. "You realize this is private property, right?" "The signs you posted are actually on my land, not HOA common area." His face drained of color. "Mrs. Thornfield says a lot of things. Doesn't make them legal," I said. Maggie wasn't content to rely solely on her son-in-law's performance. She was assembling a base of supporters, mostly newer residents who didn't know the lake's history. She hosted coffee meetings at her house, spreading whispers about my mental state after Sarah's death and questioning whether a grieving widower should have unrestricted access to community waters. She was waging psychological warfare, and it worked. Neighbors who'd once nodded warmly began avoiding my gaze when I walked Rex. Then another certified letter arrived on Friday afternoon, threatening legal action if I didn't remove the illegal structures within 2 weeks, warning of escalating enforcement and community safety concerns. Sitting at my kitchen table that evening amid photocopied HOA files and legal papers, I realized Maggie had made a crucial error. In her zeal to crush me, she'd exposed her own illegal power grab. The game was about to shift. I just needed to figure out how to play the hand I'd been dealt. Maggie's next move blindsided me. The following Tuesday, I was replacing a loose board on the dock when voices carried across the water. I looked up and saw her striding down the gravel path to Hendrick's Marina with a small entourage: Curtis, the nephew lawyer, Derek clutching his clipboard, and 2 strangers. The morning was crisp, smelling of pine sap, with a loon calling in the distance. Rex sat alert at my side, sensing trouble. 20 minutes later, Maggie came out of the Marina office wearing a smirk that churned my stomach. She clutched a manila folder to her chest like a lottery ticket. That afternoon, I learned what she'd been up to when Tommy Kowalski, the Marina's dockhand and Derek's cousin, stopped by looking nervous as a cat before a storm. "Jake, I probably shouldn't be telling you this," Tommy said, glancing around like Maggie might leap from behind a tree. "But she just offered Bill Hendricks $50,000 for exclusive boat launch services." My coffee froze halfway to my lips. "Exclusive how?" I asked. "HOA members only. She wants to buy out the Marina's public access and turn it into a private club." Tommy kicked at the gravel. "Bill's actually considering it. 50,000 cash would cover his equipment upgrades and then some." The move was brilliant and vicious. If Maggie secured control of the only other boat access on the lake, she could effectively strand me at my own property. With no alternate launch, my dock would look even worse to anxious neighbors. But her arrogance betrayed her. Tommy had been listening in on every conversation. She'd promised Bill the money would come from the HOA's emergency fund. Lowering his voice, he added that she pitched it as a community safety investment to prevent liability from uncontrolled water access. My head started spinning. Emergency funds have strict legal uses when for true emergencies only, and spending requires board votes with proper notice to all homeowners. Using emergency funds to buy a marina would be blatant misappropriation. "Tommy, you hear anything else?" I asked. "Yeah," he replied. She kept saying this would solve the Morrison problem permanently. And get this, she wants Bill to post private property signs all around the marina entrance and block off the public parking. That evening, I drove over to see Mrs. Victoria, my elderly neighbor who had lived here ever since the lake community was first built back in 1995. Her little house carried the scent of jasmine tea mixed with the warmth of old photographs, the kind of atmosphere only a home with years of life in it can hold. "Mrs. Victoria, I need to ask you about the early days here. Do you remember how the lake access was originally arranged?" Her lined face lit up instantly. "Oh yes, I remember it well. My late husband Tom was actually on the first planning committee." She shuffled over to an old cedar chest and pulled out a thick photo album. "Stuffed with memories. Take a look at this," she said, pointing to a sun-faded photo from 1995. This was the lake that very first summer. You can see there were boat launches scattered along the shoreline, not just the one at the marina. I studied the picture carefully. Sure enough, I could make out at least 4 separate ramps, each busy with families putting in everything from canoes to little motorboats. The developer promised every property owner permanent lake access, Mrs. Victoria explained as she turned more pages. "That's exactly why we bought here. This place was meant to be a community built around shared water activities." She handed me a yellowed newspaper clipping from August 1994. The headline read, "New Lake Community Guarantees Water Access for All Residents." The article quoted the developer at length about permanent rights and shared recreation. "Mrs. Victoria," I asked, "would you be willing to testify to this if it came to a legal fight?" Her eyes gleamed with resolve. "That woman is trying to take away what we all paid for 3 decades ago." "Of course I'll testify." Driving home with photocopies of her photos and articles, I began to see the larger picture. Maggie wasn't only targeting my dock, she was methodically seizing control of the entire lake access system. By locking down the marina, she could control everyone who wanted to touch the water, but she had slipped up badly. She dipped into emergency funds for something that was no emergency at all. That kind of misuse could unravel her entire authority on the board, especially when combined with her fraudulent election. Back at home, I spread my evidence across the kitchen table. The invalid election records, proof of the emergency fund abuse, The original covenant guaranteeing access, and Mrs. Victoria's photos. Rex stretched out at my feet, lifting his head now and then as if he sensed something big was coming. The puzzle pieces were falling into place. Maggie thought she was playing chess, but she had really been setting up her own defeat, illegal move by illegal move. Tomorrow, I would begin assembling the counterattack that would end her schemes for good. The next morning, I was at the county recorder's office before Dolores had even finished her first coffee. The familiar smell of old paper and toner now struck me as oddly reassuring, like the scent of justice waiting to be served. "You're becoming a regular," Dolores teased as she unlocked the file cabinets. "What are we after today?" "The original 1994 Lake Development Covenant. Mrs. Victoria told me about it, and I need to read the actual language." Dolores disappeared into the basement archives and reemerged 20 minutes later with a dust-covered binder. "Haven't seen anyone request this in years," she said, dropping it with a heavy thud onto the counter. I opened it, and my heart raced before I even finished the first page. There it was in unmistakable legal print. Lake access granted to all original property owners forever, with full rights including boat launching, dock building, and recreational use, but the real shock was waiting on page 12. Hendricks Marina operates under a renewable lease with Lakeshore Development Corporation, term 25 years. Expiration December 31st, 2022. I read it 3 times to be sure. The marina's lease had ended 2 years ago, and no one had renewed it. According to the covenant, once a lease expired, the property reverted to county control until new ownership was decided. "Dolores, what happens if someone keeps running a business on an expired lease?" I asked. She pushed her glasses up and studied the page. "Technically, that makes them squatters. The land falls into tax default, and the county can auction it off to recover unpaid taxes." My pulse spiked. "And how much are we talking for 2 years of back taxes on the marina?" "Let's see," she said, typing quickly. "The property is valued at $180,000. Annual tax is about $6,000, so 2 years plus penalties, roughly $12,000. $12,000. I had more than that tucked away from decades of electrical work. "When's the next tax auction?" I asked, quarterly. "Next one is—" She flipped through her desk calendar. "This Friday morning, 10 o'clock. 3 days away," I murmured. "Has anyone else been asking about the marina records?" Dolores shook her head, scrolling through her logs. "Nope. You're the only one to pull these files in more than 2 years. Most people don't even know these old covenants exist." I sat staring at the binder, mind racing. If I bought the marina at auction, I'd own the only commercial launch on the lake. Maggie's HOA power play would collapse instantly. And with control of the marina, I could finally force a resolution. She couldn't threaten my dock if I held the alternative. What would someone need to bid on Friday? I asked. "Certified check, valid ID, and show up on time," Dolores said. "If there's only one bidder, you get it for the minimum. If there are more, highest bid wins." I thanked her and walked out in a daze. The morning sun felt warmer, the air sharper and cleaner. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I wasn't just holding ground, I was holding the winning hand. Maggie thought she had me cornered with her marina deal. In reality, she'd walked me straight to the solution that could end her games forever. Time to cash out some retirement funds and become an accidental marina owner. That Wednesday afternoon, I began assembling my war council. My first call was to Helen Vasquez, a retired attorney known for dismantling corrupt HOA boards across 3 counties. "Jake Morrison," I introduced myself. "I've been expecting this call," Helen said, with the calm strength of someone who had spent 40 years taking down bureaucratic bullies. "That Thornfield woman sounds like real trouble." We met the next morning at her office, a converted Victorian house that smelled of fresh coffee and old law books. Helen, sharp-eyed with silver hair pulled into a no-nonsense bun, wore a navy suit that declared business. "Lay it all out," she said. Clearing her desk, I spread every document before her. Maggie's invalid election, her misuse of emergency funds, the covenant promising access, and the marina lease expiration. Helen examined each piece with surgeon-like focus, jotting notes with an elegant fountain pen. "This is gold," she said finally, a fierce smile spreading. "Thornfield's broken more rules than I can count. But your marina acquisition? That's brilliant. Next stop was First National Bank, where I'd been a customer for 2 decades. Robert Kim, the bank president, listened carefully as I explained. Jake, you want to liquidate $30,000 of your retirement savings to buy a marina at a tax auction? He asked, leaning back in his leather chair. That's not your everyday Thursday request, I laid out the situation. His skeptical look shifted to amusement, then admiration. So you're buying the marina to stop the HOA from locking out the community? He chuckled. I've seen that trick before, boards trying to monopolize resources. Usually it's golf courses or pools. I'm glad someone's standing up to it. Robert pushed the paperwork through immediately, arranging a certified check for Friday. I hope you win. Folks like that need to be knocked down. That evening, my phone rang. Patricia Wells, the county commissioner, had heard from Dolores about my research. Mr. Morrison, she said in a matter-of-fact tone, I hear you're interested in Hendricks Marina. The county's been trying to clear this up for 2 years. The prior owner died, his estate never settled, and the current operator's just been squatting. If you're serious about bidding, I can tell you no one else has shown interest. 12,000 should secure it easily. My final reinforcement came from my neighbors. By Thursday night, 8 households had joined forces, calling themselves, half-jokingly, the Original Owners Alliance. This isn't just about your dock anymore, Jake, said Tom Hriss from across the lake. Maggie's rewriting the rules for the whole community. Mrs. Victoria brought cookies and more photos. The Kowalskis provided copies of their deeds. Even quiet Bob Martinez arrived with his 1995 purchase agreement, spelling out guaranteed lake access. We outlined our plan. I would handle the marina auction, Helen would file motions challenging Maggie's authority, and the neighbors would document any harassment. Most people don't realize, Helen explained, spreading her notes across my table, that a successful tax auction bid gives you clear title, free of past claims. Clean slate. If you own the marina, you control lake access. Maggie can't enforce her exclusive HOA scheme without your approval. The brilliance was in its simplicity. Instead of fighting Maggie head-on, we were cutting off her ability to control the board. Friday morning, I'd walk into the courthouse with a certified check and walk out owning the very thing Maggie thought would give her ultimate power. The irony couldn't have been sharper. Her trap for me had become the very path to the solution that trapped her instead. Rex seemed to pick up on my energy, shadowing me around the house with his tail wagging as I prepped for the auction the next morning. Even my dog sensed we were about to flip the entire game. Friday morning arrived with that crisp autumn air that makes you feel like anything might happen. At sunrise, I sat on the dock, sipping coffee, watching the fog lift off the water, when my phone buzzed. A text from Tommy at the marina. Maggie's been blowing up Bill's phone all morning. She's in a panic. The tax auction wasn't until 10, but apparently word had leaked that someone had eyes on the marina. I could practically smell Maggie's desperation in the misty air. By 8, I was buttoned into my best flannel and heading for the courthouse. At the stop sign near my drive, Derek's security truck slid in behind me. He tailed me for 3 blocks, clipboard perched on his dash like some makeshift badge, before peeling off. The courthouse buzzed with the usual Friday rhythm. Clerks rustling stacks of paper, lawyers in pricey suits darting between offices. The mingled scent of burnt coffee and waxed floors. The auction room was upstairs, small, with about 20 folding chairs aimed at a podium. At exactly 10, Commissioner Patricia Wells stepped up. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the quarterly property tax auction. First item, Hendricks Marina, Lot 47B. Appraised value, $180,000. Back taxes owed, $12,247, including penalties. I glanced around. An old man buried in his newspaper. A woman with a real estate folder. A guy in coveralls clearly waiting on something else. Opening bid, $12,347. Any takers? I lifted my hand. Yes, ma'am. Any other bids? Silence. The old man didn't even look up. The woman tapped at her phone. Going once? Going twice. Sold to Mr. Morrison for $12,347. And just like that, the marina was mine. Less than 5 minutes and it was done. Maggie's panic, however, was only getting started. While signing papers at the clerk's office, my phone rang. Helen Vasquez, my attorney, sounded both amused and exasperated. Jake, you won't believe this. Maggie just tried to hire me to file an emergency injunction against the marina sale. She what? She found out 20 minutes too late. Now she's screaming that the auction was invalid and has to be overturned. I told her I already represent you. She lost it, ranting about conflicts of interest and neighborhood conspiracies. By noon, Derek had escalated from lurking to outright harassment. He stormed into the Marina mid-meeting with Bill Hendricks, clipboard in hand like some self-appointed inspector. "Sir, this property transfer violates HOA community standards," he declared, clearly parroting lines Maggie had written. "The board is prepared to pursue legal action." Bill, grizzled from 15 years running the place, stared at him like he'd sprouted horns. "Son, this man bought it fair and square from the county. HOA has no say in county sales." But Derek kept reading his script. "Mr. Morrison's actions are part of a disruptive pattern threatening community governance. This acquisition escalates anti-community behavior." I almost had to admire the kid's loyalty, even if he sounded like he was quoting a manual. "Derek, go tell Maggie her Marina deal is dead. She can't buy lake rights from someone who doesn't own them anymore." His face flushed red above his uniform collar. He scribbled furiously on his clipboard and stomped off to his truck, gravel crunching under his boots like a sulking teenager. That afternoon, the real showdown began. Maggie herself stormed onto the dock, Curtis in tow, his red blazer clashing with her fury. The sharp click of her heels on the wood was like a warning siren. "Mr. Morrison," she barked, jabbing a finger toward me. "This fraudulent acquisition will not stand." Curtis, trailing behind like a reluctant puppy, tried to soften her. "Aunt Maggie, maybe we should— There's nothing private about theft," she snapped. "This man has schemed to undermine legitimate HOA authority. You think buying this marina gives you control over the lake? I'll have this sale overturned before the week is out," I grinned. "Good luck with that. The county's just happy the property's back on the tax rolls." Her face darkened from red to purple. The meltdown was underway. By Saturday, Maggie tried a softer approach. I was hammering a new plank on the dock when she appeared, alone this time, in designer jeans and cashmere, her version of casual. "Jake, can we talk?" she asked, her voice stripped of its usual command, almost humble. Almost, I kept hammering. "Sure, Maggie. What's on your mind?" She stepped closer, perfume mingling with pine and lake air. "Maybe we got off on the wrong foot. What if we compromise? Drop the dock violations, you keep your launch. We'll amend the bylaws to secure your access rights. In exchange, you allow a fair schedule for marina use, alternating days for members and the public." It sounded reasonable, but I knew better than to trust her offers. "And the 50 grand you promised Bill?" I asked. Her jaw twitched. "That was misunderstood. The board only voted to explore partnerships. No funds were committed. Tommy had overheard otherwise, but I played along. Seems fair. Let me think it over this weekend." What I didn't know then was that she was secretly recording the whole exchange on her phone, planning to edit it into a fake extortion confession. But the plan blew up in her face. Curtis himself tipped Helen off Monday morning, clearly uneasy with his aunt's tactics. By Tuesday evening, Maggie presented her doctored audio at the HOA meeting, only for Mrs. Victoria, attending as an observer, to call it out instantly. "This is edited," she declared during public comments. "I've known Jake's voice for 15 years. This isn't how he talks." Maggie went pale. "You're not qualified to— I taught English 35 years, Mrs. Victoria shot back. I know spliced words when I hear them. Meanwhile, Maggie had been stirring up poison online under fake accounts. Lake Community Watch, Concerned Homeowner, 47, posting hints about my mental state since losing my wife, questioning my judgment and even safety. Some newer residents started whispering, giving me sidelong looks at the store, but neighbors who knew me weren't fooled. Tom Hendricks traced all the fake profiles back to Maggie's home IP address. Technology has a way of betraying liars. By Wednesday, Derek was back, clipboard in hand, waving what looked like county inspection forms. "Sir, I need to conduct a safety review. Docks. Storage, fuel procedures," he announced. Trying for official. "Derek, you're not a county inspector. You're HOA security. I have authority to enforce standards." "No, you don't. You're trespassing." "If Maggie wants an inspection, she can go through proper channels." His bravado cracked instantly. "Mrs. Thornfield said she doesn't control county property." He retreated to his truck, probably calling Maggie for instructions. I almost pitied him. Almost, but I was done playing defense. It was time to end this circus. Thursday night, Maggie staged her grand finale. An emergency community meeting announced by hand-delivered flyers, stamped with fake official letterhead and red borders, blaring, urgent safety crisis, immediate action required. When I arrived 15 minutes early, the parking lot was already half full. Word had spread far beyond our neighborhood. I noticed cars from nearby neighborhoods and even spotted Sarah Martinez from the local paper, notebook, and camera at the ready. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like restless insects, their cold glare mixing with the sharp scent of cheap coffee, cleaning products, and worn carpet, the trademark aroma of a community center. Maggie had staged the room like a courtroom. Sitting behind a folding table at the front with Curtis and 2 HOA board members I barely recognized on either side. More than 60 people crammed into chairs built for maybe 40. The air was so tense it could have been sliced with a boat propeller. When the noise died down, Maggie rose, dressed in a navy power suit that screamed authority. Her voice rang clearly across the crowded space as she launched into her script. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're here tonight because our community is facing an unprecedented danger to safety, property values, and our very way of life." She flung her hand toward me in the third row, where I sat calm as glassy water at sunrise. Mr. Jake Morrison has carried out a systematic assault on legitimate community leadership through intimidation, manipulation of property, and what can only be called extortion, the crowd murmured. Some neighbors nodded along, others looked doubtful. I picked out Mrs. Victoria up front, Tom Hendris in the back, and several of my supporters scattered throughout. "His unlawful takeover of Marina land is a direct attack on our ability to manage shared resources," Maggie pressed on, her voice thick with artificial outrage. "He's holding our lake access hostage to strong-arm the HOA into his personal agenda." Curtis fidgeted, rifling through papers as if they were a deck of cards. "The kid knew this was about to go off the rails, and furthermore," Maggie announced, producing her doctored evidence, "I have proof of Mr. Morrison's explicit threats against our community." She played the edited audio, snippets of our Marina conversation hacked up to make me sound menacing. The cuts were so crude that several people exchanged wary glances. That was my cue. I rose slowly, pulling a manila folder from my jacket. The room went still. You could hear the clock ticking, someone's stomach growling, even the faint hum of the heating unit. "Maggie," I said evenly, walking to the front, "that's quite a tale. But I've got some paperwork that tells another version." I slapped the original 1994 Lake Covenant onto the table. "This shows that lake access belongs to every original property owner, forever. The HOA never had authority over water rights." Her confidence began to splinter. "And this," I added, laying down election records, "proves your presidency was never legitimate. You didn't follow proper notice procedures." Curtis leaned in to study the documents, his face draining of color. He muttered something to Maggie that made her jaw tighten. "And here's the best part," I said, spreading out the emergency fund paperwork Helen had compiled. "You promised Bill Hendricks $50,000 from emergency reserves, money legally reserved for actual emergencies, not side deals for Marina control." The crowd erupted with shocked whispers. Even some board members looked blindsided. That's not," Maggie stammered, her composure unraveling. "Oh, and about that recording?" I pulled out my phone, hit play, and the full, unaltered conversation filled the room. Her cut-and-paste version suddenly looked like amateur fakery. Turns out, I'd been recording too. Sarah Martinez's pen scratched furiously as her camera clicked, capturing every moment of Maggie's unraveling. That's when Commissioner Patricia Wells stepped in through the back, a county sheriff's deputy at her side. Their footsteps on the linoleum sliced through the noise. "Miss Thornfield," Patricia declared with the authority of office, "we need to address your interference with county property auctions and the misuse of association funds." The deputy stepped forward with legal papers. "Ma'am, you are being served a cease and desist order for harassment of county property owners." Maggie's face cycled through red and white as the room watched her power disintegrate. Curtis gathered his papers quietly and slipped out, finished with his aunt's mess. "This is a conspiracy," Maggie exploded, jabbing her finger around the room. "He's tricked all of you into supporting his illegal schemes." But the crowd had turned. Even her loyalists shook their heads, embarrassed. The HOA queen had been dethroned by her own arrogance. The fallout came fast. By Monday, Maggie resigned in an angry email blaming community conspiracies for forcing her out. Victory never tasted so sweet. Derek found a job 2 towns over, no doubt relieved to escape his mother-in-law's antics. Curtis went back to boring contract law, grateful to be free of family drama. The Thornfield empire collapsed like a house of cards in a storm. The Marina's revival went beyond my expectations. Bill lit up when I offered him a profit-sharing deal instead of hourly wages. 30 years in this business, and this is the first time an owner actually cared about the crew, he said, showing me outdated equipment begging for replacement. Tommy's promotion to assistant manager came with a grin so wide, it reminded me of my nephew catching his first fish. I survived the craziest soap opera on the lake, he laughed, and all I got was this amazing job and front row seats to justice. Within 2 weeks, I'd restored free marina access to all original homeowners, exactly as the 1994 covenant promised. The sounds I'd missed returned. Kids laughing, boats starting up, fishing lines whipping into the water. The lake was alive again. Property values jumped 15% in 6 months thanks to restored access and upgrades. Even the real estate agent was floored. Lake access is our biggest selling point now, she said. But my proudest achievement was something deeper. The Sarah Morrison Memorial Fishing Program. Every Saturday, the marina transformed into a playground of discovery for 25 kids, from timid 6-year-olds to confident teens, learning everything from baiting hooks to water safety. The air filled with sunscreen. Fresh lake breeze and endless questions. Why do fish bite in the morning? Can I name mine before I catch it? Will Rex teach me to swim too? Rex became the most patient fishing teacher alive, letting little hands pet his fur while parents snapped photos of first catches. Watching a nervous 10-year-old beam at their first bluegill was pure magic, reminding every adult why childhood wonder matters. We provided everything. Rods, tackle lessons, even a station to clean fish and learn the responsibility of food. The county conservation team taught ecology alongside angling basics. Mrs. Victoria served as lake historian, sharing tales of the past as children waited for bites. Her gentle voice weaving nature and memory together, healing rippled outward. The newly elected HOA board slashed violation notices by 70% and set up transparent budgets to prevent future abuse. Neighbors started talking again instead of hiding behind curtains. Helen Vasquez soon got calls from across 3 states. Your story proves one person with documentation can defeat corruption, she told me. You've inspired homeowners everywhere to fight back. Summer evenings brought families for fishing derbies, safety lessons, and spontaneous dockside barbecues. Laughter replaced the tension that once smothered the lake. I still fish with Rex at sunrise, but now we're often joined by neighbors rediscovering morning peace. The water reflects more than sky. It mirrors a community that chose unity over conflict. Sometimes I talk to Sarah while casting, telling her about kids learning to fish or neighbors turning into true friends. I know she'd be proud that beauty rose from so much ugliness. The marina even earned county tourism recognition, but real success isn't the publicity. It's the kids learning, families bonding, and a community that beats small-time tyranny with solidarity. Now it's your turn. Share your worst HOA nightmare in the comments. Let's stand together against these petty tyrants. Subscribe to HOA Stories for more tales of ordinary people defeating corruption with persistence, preparation, and community spirit. Because justice tastes better when shared.